This episode is sponsored by Kelly Stark. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 123, Combining Podcast Lessons. Reinvent new combinations of what you already own. Improvise. Become more creative. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Evolution is the secret for the next step. Karl Lagerfeld, unquote. Now, some of you may be a little bit confused by the title of today's show because last week I actually said it was going to be about something completely different, but I had a change of heart after I'd recorded it, an epiphany perhaps. And I don't get much interaction on social media for this show. Well, I do, but it's generally the same folk all the time. Big shout out to you guys. But I suspect that some of you that are listening find it difficult to apply what you learn here. This was just me mulling this over in my head, and I thought maybe I should do something about that. So today I want to talk again about the same thing I talk about in episode 1, and that is high-level thinking and of how to use this podcast or even any other productivity resources and techniques that you know so that you can get the most out of them. A little of what you like does you good, but you can have too much of a good thing. Dick King Smith, unquote. Now, I listen to podcasts myself, productivity podcasts, in fact, quite often, and not nearly enough of them in the last few months, though, but it's something that I get a lot out of. And I do this podcast partly because I enjoy listening to others, and yes, as I say, I do listen to productivity shows, not to nick their ideas, although I dare say that they end up coming back in again somewhere down the line into my brain. But I listen probably for the same reasons that you listen to this one, and that it's to motivate me and broaden my mind. We are buried beneath the weight of information, which is being confused with knowledge. Quantity is being confused with abundance, and wealth with happiness. Tom Waits, unquote. The difficulty I find is of too much information, and that's why I want to stop and catch breath for a moment today. As I've recently completed on a whole load of fight work, I find myself moving back onto what I had originally planned on doing like 12 weeks ago, and I'm going to have to build a new plan and a new execution strategy to get myself back on track with that stuff. This plan was inspired by recent episodes though, so I want to show you here how I'm combining some of my own lessons to try and propel myself back into activity. And the episodes that I'm specifically using here are episode 112, Brain Dumps, 99, To-Do Lists, 104, Not To-Do Lists, 122, The Focus Funnel, 97, Focus on 3 Things, 119, Technology Addiction, 103, A Hole in Your Bucket, and episode 72, Smart Goals. Oh, and episode 105, Parkinson's Law. Sounds like a lot. It's not as it's not as crazy, it's not as overwhelming as you think. I'll only be touching on each one of these briefly. Today I'm going to start things off with a brain dump, and that is episode 122, and that's to get everything that's clogging up my mind onto a whiteboard and out of my head. And it's not too confused up there, I think, but what's important here is that I want to apply what I talk about in episode 98, opening and closing doors, to end line as much as I can before I start new things, or to restart uninitiated plans that I didn't quite get going before I got derailed. And I think that's an episode I didn't even mention. Episode 98 is obviously slightly in play here as well. And I've got one key project that must be completed when I think about this, and that's a behind-the-scenes documentary that I shot for the Mercy Falls feature, Ryan Hendrick's film. And I also want to batch produce and record a few more of these shows. This is kind of the second last in the episode. I think I'll run it definitely up to the end of the series, possibly up to the first episode of season 10, as that'll provide me with 6 or more weeks of elbow room to do other things, but I desperately need to get back onto my own film projects by the end of this week, and that's the thing that's driving me. And all of that is kind of part one of what I'm talking about here. Part two is to break down the brain dump by dropping the whole list into the focus funnel that I talked about in last week's show. And the focus funnel will help me to generate to-do lists. That's episode 99. That's a list of tasks and goals that I know I need to do and I know that I want to do as well. And I'll combine that list with episode 97, focus on 3 things, so that I don't set out to do too much on my to-do list. I don't set out to do too many things. You know, I'll be focusing on 3 things and effectively, 3 big things, effectively ignoring the rest. And the to-do lists that I come up with will all be focused towards achieving these 3 main goals. Now, just as important though as what I'm going to do is for me to create a list of things which I'm not going to do. So I'll talk about that next. Now, a few shows ago, episode 119, I talked about technology addiction, and one part of the show was 14 questions to ask yourself to see if you have an addiction. That show was put together by Christina Littleson, and it wasn't one I'd researched myself, and I really found that it hit home for me as I realised with these 14 questions you had to answer yes or no to, that I had formed addictions, or at the very least I'd created bad habits associated not just with YouTube, my much talked about YouTube addiction, which I was very aware of, watching too much of, but also on food and a few other things. And that's really what started me thinking about all of this and actually led to this episode, as these bad habits that I've been finding them hard to break. And I'd not been well, and I'd had a lot of work on the cards, so my bad habits had kind of sprung, a lot of them, from trying to give myself an easy life when I wasn't working and I wasn't feeling on top of things. I was under the weather. And just another thing that went along with the working is that I was eating whenever I could get a moment to sit down, rather than the previous period to that busy period, when I was able to control not only when I ate, but what I ate by preparing it myself and having a real awareness of health and fitness, because I had the time to focus on that. There's no two ways about it, folks. There is a direct link between our productivity and our fitness level and what we put into our bodies. Getting control back over these things must therefore become a key part of the plan that I am building. And that leads me to episode 104, not to-do lists. I think that's what it's called, something like that. But it's definitely episode 104 because I looked it up before I started recording this. But I'll be creating a things not to do list before I finalise my to-do list and I choose the up to 3 things that I'm going to focus on for the next 30 days. The hole in my bucket, that's episode 103, the hole in my bucket that I recognise, the thing that's keeping me back, is the derailment of my regular swimming routine and the focus that I used to have on my eating habits. And breaking those elements down further, I can tell you now that my to-do lists will involve swimming, walking and exercising every day, and picking up my DDP yoga, picking that back up again, because I was doing that very, very regularly, but these are the things that started dropping by the wayside as I had to run off and do different jobs. And the other thing, of course, is controlling my eating, initially just by writing out a food diary, detailing everything that I eat and drink for the first 7 days, and then taking action to right the problems that I see in that eating pattern. And that's something I would advise you to do yourself, folks, if you think you've lost control of your eating, is write it down. You know, it's that thing, 42% more likely to do stuff if you write it down. If you start writing this stuff down, you become much more aware of what you're eating and potentially when you're eating. And you might find if you have a drop in energy at a specific time, it's worth putting that down as well, because you could look like an hour before that and something that you've eaten you might be intolerant to, and you might be able to start taking that out of your diet so that your productivity, your focus and your energy levels and your alertness improve by eating and drinking and behaving differently, as exercising on occasion. This isn't a show about all that. I'm just throwing it out there for you. Eating properly is great. I mean, you cut the fat down, cut the cholesterol out, but you still got to get your rest and you got to have some form of exercise. Mike Ditka, unquote. See, even Mike Ditka says it, whoever he is. He's probably someone very important. I found him on A to Z Quotes, which is my favourite go-to place for quotes, and I like that one. Anyway, this brings me to the final 2 lessons, and they are SMART Goal Setting Theory. That's episode 72, which will be applied to the 3 main goals that I set out, and those 3 larger tasks that I'm going to focus on over the first month, and also the smaller goals that will be the building blocks of those larger tasks. All of these will have SMART Goal Setting Theory applied to them. And I'll come back to that in a second. But the last but not least thing that I'm going to be using, lesson I'm going to be using, is Parkinson's Law. And that will be applied to the day-to-day tasks of the to-do lists. And I'll be attempting to apply it to the 3 main tasks as well. And I'm applying that law right now as I write this episode and record this episode to ensure I get this one in the can today. And Parkinson's Law, for those of you that have forgotten, is the adage that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. It also contracts though, and I gave myself until 6:30 as I'm recording this on the 11th of October, and it's currently at 23 minutes past 6, and I'm well on the way to getting this one recorded. So it is something that works. But if I didn't give myself SMART goals, that's goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, I wouldn't be able to apply Parkinson's Law to those tasks. And as I say, that's what I'm up to right now. Well, not exactly right now as I'm recording a show about it, but the plan that I am coming up with here informed the show, my own plan, and I felt it was worth sharing with you and bumping a planned episode further down the line. You'll be hearing that one in season 10. I think I've got it down as the 2nd or 3rd episode in season 10. So just to remind you once again, folks, don't let yourself get overwhelmed with too much productivity stuff getting in your head. Get that high level thinking going instead and utilize the lessons which work best for you in your current situation. That's how to get stuff done. Life comes at us in waves. We can't predict or control those waves, but we can learn to surf. Dan Millman, unquote. And that's today's call to action. It's to stop and think for a moment. And what lessons have I learned here that I can apply to my own life? Not necessarily in this episode, but generally in the lessons in the episodes that I've put out there recently. There are detailed show notes for every episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. It's all free, so you can look stuff up and listen again if you need to, and you think you want to get a handle on something that's been talked about before. And I want you to choose 2 or more of the lessons that you've learned here on the show and apply them to your own life and career right now. Get thinking about it if you're driving or if you're out and about or walking the dog or whatever. But when you get free of that, whatever you're doing, I want you to stop and write it down. And as I've said many times before, including about 3 minutes ago, you're 42% more likely to succeed in your plans if you write them down. So please do that. In next week's show, which is the final episode of Season 9, I will be looking at a topic that comes up time and again in Facebook groups and forums for filmmakers, etc., that I frequent. It's a regular topic of conversation for freelancers as well, and it's called Doing Stuff for Free. In the meantime, I'll end with some words from Mark Twain, who said, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started. The secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks down into small, manageable tasks and starting on the first one." So take note, folks, of this. Just thinking about all this will get you nowhere fast. You need to take action, and there is no time like the present. Now, take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you can hear right now is Adventures by Ehimitsu, and the executive producer of this season is Christopher McPhillips from Artos Digital. You can check them out in the show notes if you want to know more. You can also view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com, or a kind of cut down version of them on most of the apps. Follow me on any social media you want to find out there, at FilmProProdPod on Twitter, at FilmProProductivity on Facebook, and please continue to support the show, folks, by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review. I ran out of time there, but I kind of did it deliberately. I just want you to know that as I complete this show, it is now 27 minutes past 6. So I, using Parkinson's law, successfully completed this smart goal that I had to produce and record this episode. And smart, there's one more reminder, is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. My time-bound was 6:30, and I've beaten it by 2 minutes. That's Parkinson's law. See you next week.